Now, this is the last video for this section. In this section, we have learned about enumerate, we have learned about zip. Now we are going to look through random function. This is not exactly much of a function, but more of a library. Yes, we haven't yet started libraries, modules, and packages yet, but I want you guys to have a quick look into random and exactly what is random and how to execute them, because we are going to build up a small mini project once we start or once we complete functions. Okay. So let's look into what exactly is a random library or a random function. Let's refer it as random function. Now, a random function is used to randomize things. Now, from the name itself, you can get it out. What I mean by this, if you want to get some random numbers, if you want to run some random numbers from 1 to 10, you can just use the random module or random function and you will get all the random number between that range. Right. Now, let's say we have various different functions more into this, like the shuffle function. What does the shuffle function do? Let's say you have a deck of card, and whenever you play out with that deck of card, you're going to shuffle it up. And why do you shuffle it up? So that every card has an unique position each time you play it out. The same thing applies over here. If you pass the shuffle function on any list, then all the positions, whatever values are there, it will just mismatch from this position to that position. Some will move there, some will move here, and that is how the random function works. Random function, from the name itself, is used to randomize sums. Perhaps it is one of the most important thing that allows you to generate random numbers. When to use it? We want the computer to pick a random number between a range, pick a random element from a list, pick a random card from a deck, flip a coin, etc. In all of these places, we are going to use a random function. When making your password database more secure or powering a random page feature of your website, then also you are going to use up the random function. Now, let's jump into Jupyter Notebook and look into a random function. Before random function, we are going to go through a bit into in and not in. These are very few concepts which I feel that you guys should be knowing. So let's jump into our Jupyter Notebook. Let's look into what is in and not in and where to use it. So let's name this section as in and oops, a typo, not in. Change it to markdown and create some new cells down and over here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create out some uh, random list. So my list is equal to, let's write out some random things. I'm going to write a name, some names. So let's write some numbers. And now some decimal values, 23.4.2. So these are some really random things. Now what I can do is let's write one more name as issue Shikha, and let's write out a new list 2 comma 3 comma 4. So let's print out my list first of all. My list, if I print it out, okay, so these are all the values that I am having in my list. Now where does in and not in comes into play? Let's say I have to check if a particular variable is present in the list or not. Then I am going to use print, that is in statement. So let's say 3 in my list. That's it. 3 is present in my list. So over here I can see that 3 is present in my list. So it is returning true. Let's change it to some random big numbers. False. 3435 is not present in my list. Same thing if you want to check out for this. It's going to occur, yes, this list is present in my list. Now, let's check out for what exactly is not in. As you could just correlate it with in, the opposite of it is not in. If something is not present in that list, it will return true, else it will return false. So let's first let's check my list, 3 in my list. So true, 3 is in. Now if I do it for not in, 3 not in my list, so false. We are checking, we are just asking our interpreter, that a Python interpreter, that is 3 not in the list. So it is returning false because 3 is present in my list. Same thing, let's write some random numbers. 3 not in my list. So yes, 343 is not present in my list. So that's all about in and not in. These are quite some important operators that you are probably going to use a lot once you start with coding up. Now let's jump into random function. Let's create this as a markdown, create some new cells. Now random is a library and we haven't discussed much about it, but I want to show you some of the things that we could do. So this is how we can import a library. A library is a place where you have a bunch of codes. Just as a standard library, you have a library where there are many books. Inside that books, you have vast amount of knowledges, right? So you can just correlate all of that into this. So a library is a very big place where you have different modules. All these modules have different codes. Okay. We have a big package. Then in that package, we have some libraries. In that libraries, we have modules. In that modules, all the modules will be having different codes. Okay. That code can be called out whenever you want to use it. So again, random is a library. I am calling out that I need the random library. So this is how I can import out the random library. Now I want to uh, get or generate a random number between 0 and 1. So I may just use random. If I run it out, every time you run it out, it will be generating a random number. It generates a random number between 0 and 1. Let's run it each time. So each time you run it, it will be of different terms. Now if you want to check the description, you can just check out what exactly does it do. X in the interval of 0 and 1. So you can read out the complete doc string over here. Now this is one of the functions that you could do using random. Then we have, let's take my list. Let's copy this, or already it has been run off. So let's check what my list was. So I have this list and you want and a random value from this list. So what I can do is I can use random dot choice, and inside of this I'm gonna write my list. So each time you run it, it will take a different value from the list. So let me run it a couple of times. Now it's 3, 34, 234, 34, 23.44, 54.24. So every time you run it up, it will be taking out different values. Okay. Now one more thing, a very quick important thing now. If you want to return an random integer between some range, so you might again use the random function random dot rand int, and inside of this you are going to write 0 and 100. Let's execute it out. Every time you run it out, it will be taking out a random number from 0 to 100. So every time it's quite random. So if you are not understanding the random function or what exactly is a library, package or modules, that totally fine. We are going to go much deeper into libraries, package and modules once we move into the higher ends of the sections of this Python course. Thank you very much. That's it for this section of Python training. We have gone through random, in, not in, enumerate, zip. In our next following videos, we are going to start with functions, and then we are going to look into a bit about file handling.